Six Music.
Six Music. This
is BBC Radio.
Six Music.
Right now, it's Matt Everitt's The First Time.
Hello, I'm Matt Everitt, and welcome to a brand new series of The First Time. This is where we meet some of the most influential and best-loved musicians around and take a look at the first pivotal musical moments that made them who they are today. This week I'm talking to a musician, songwriter and occasional actor who swaggered onto the music scene as the frontman of one of the most exciting bands of the 1990s. With his distinctive vocals, aggressive guitar style, androgynous appearance and provocative persona, my guest won over legions of devoted fans worldwide, including David Bowie, who invited the band to support him on tour. He's also collaborated with the likes of The Cure, Jane Birkin and Michael Stipe, and in our opinion, has the best laugh in rock. I'm delighted to say that this week I'll be talking to Placebo's Brian Molko. Born in Brussels to an American father and Scottish mother, Brian's family moved frequently during his childhood, living in Dundee, Liberia, Lebanon and the village of Longo in Belgium before eventually settling in Luxembourg. Brian and Placebo co-founder Stefan Olsdahl both attended the American International School in Luxembourg, but never actually spoke to each other. It was only after a chance meeting in London in 1994 that they decided to form the band. After a while hacking through the usual London pub scene, they released their first single, Bruised Pristine, in 1995, and their self-titled debut album a year later. And from that record, you've just heard the single Nancy Boy, Placebo's first top 10 hit, but not their last by a long way. Since then, they've released 7 albums and sold 11 million records worldwide. In this interview, recorded in 2016 but never before aired, Brian talks about his first musical memories, working with Bowie, and the bands that impacted on his life. But I started by asking Brian, as I do with all my guests, when was the first time he was aware of music as a child?
First time I was aware of it, probably at Christmas. Some kind of Pat Boone or disco on the radio.
Christmas disco?
No, not Christmas disco. Year-round disco.
Did music pervade your early childhood a lot?
Yeah, it did. It did, not necessarily because my parents were into it that much. You know, there was just so much more of it on TV, even in Europe. So, yeah, there were a lot of really good music programs. So
this was all like, because you were obviously grew up in lots of different places.
Well, yeah, mainly, by my teens I was in Luxembourg, so that was kind of when, my interest was spiked.
What was the, I was going to say Damascus moment, what was the epiphany, the TV epiphany, can you remember? Yeah,
TV epiphanies. I mean, there is one around Ashes to Ashes, the video for Ashes to Ashes, which just by David Bowie, which is probably the first time that I saw or heard David Bowie. And it was just so strange, so out of the ordinary, so unlike anything I'd seen or heard. And it was mad. I mean, it's a much maligned decade, the 80s, When you think about pop music, for example, a song like Ashes to Ashes, which is completely, it's really out there, it's really avant-garde.
In the top 10 as well.
It's in the top 10, and you've got like Babushka by Kate Bush in the top 10 around the same time. And Peter Gabriel, Shocking Monkeys. This was pop music, this was people really kind of like pushing it.
We have to do first single that you owned.
Oh.
That you went out and bought. Come on, everyone.
I don't remember the first single. I remember the first album.
What was the first album?
And I'm actually really proud of this. It was Thriller by Michael Jackson.
Genuinely, or are you just saying that?
Huh? No, genuinely. Yeah. I was really, really into Beat It. I went to John Menzies in Dundee. And first gig I went to was this. I grew up in a francophone speaking country, so like the first gig I went to see was a French band called Telephone.
I've heard of them.
Well, they were probably the biggest French rock band in the 80s.
What do you remember from the show?
I remember my brother took me. I was probably 11, and I sort of I lost my brother, pushed myself to the front of the crowd. I climbed over the barriers, and I was hanging out with the security people. And then, I don't know, 25, 30 years later, so, yeah, on French TV, they've actually gone through this concert, and you know, frame by frame, and they found me as an 11-year-old over the barrier watching the gig.
That's so cute.
Yeah, I was very cute. In my jeans jacket.
When was the first time you thought, I could be a singer, I could do that?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, at that moment, I think was kind of like I feel like responding with something very, very rude, which is unbroadcastable on the BBC.
You know what I mean? I mean more kind of like, you know, people just say, I still don't think of myself as being up there. I still don't think I've made it yet. They're still chasing that thing. I guess that's what I mean.
Yeah. But I guess for me, the realization that it could happen, you know, came around the beginning of the band getting together.
So it wasn't something that you'd harbored since you were like, you know, since seeing shows when you were 11?
No, I mean, no, but I knew I could sing because like there's
By Pink Floyd.
I was nuts about psychedelic music, and
How old was this when you...
14, 15, I was completely nuts. Yeah, really, really nuts about psychedelic music. Yeah, for me, the first Pink Floyd album is a work of absolute genius. It's completely different from everything else they've done, because by the time they get around to their second album, they've kicked out Syd Barrett, who's founded the band and wrote all of the songs, and then they become something else. What's great about this record is that it sits on the border of like of garage rock from the 60s and psychedelia, you know, because essentially Syd Barrett was, you know, very much inspired by the blues, and it's a real moment captured in time before psychedelia sort of ran away with itself. There's still like a real hard edge to it, and you can really hear it on Lucifer Sam in the guitars. They're not nice guitars, but they don't have to be nice to be beautiful.
Can you remember the first Placebo gig, and what was it like?
Terrible. I mean, I think it was at the Rock Garden in Covent Garden, where the Apple Store is now, and yeah, we were atrocious. To the point where, I mean, where Stefan would walk across the stage and tune my guitar for me. Yeah, it was pretty bad.
What else do you remember from the show?
Fergal Sharkey from the Undertones came. He was an A&R guy, and but he left. We were so bad that he left. Yeah.
Were there many people there?
Not really.
When was the time that kind of formed into something that maybe Fergal Sharkey would stick around for, or something that you started to be more proud of?
I don't know. We went away. We rehearsed for a long time.
Right.
Yeah. So we rehearsed and wrote a lot more songs. So I mean, there was a good year's kind of apprenticeship, you know, that we focused on, because we knew we needed to get better.
Very first single was 95, Bruce Pristine.
Mm-hmm.
What are your memories about recording that? Did you go in stoked with ideology and this is our moment, we're ready, when the world hears this, it will
I remember passing out on the sofa from drinking too much really strong cider. That's what I remember.
Nothing else from the session at all?
No, what I do remember about it, one of its first plays is Mark Radcliffe played it. And at the time, we used to play so fast that instead of playing it at 45, he played it at 33, because that had to be the correct speed.
There's no way.
There's no way that somebody's actually, like, 3 people have actually recorded a song this fast. I don't know. We just kept, we'd start and just kept speeding up and speeding up and speeding up and speeding up. Yeah, that's what we did.
How do you feel now about that first Placebo album, 96?
I think it's a good document of a band that's still learning how to make a record, really. And it is pretty much how we sounded at that time. So it feels like a collection of songs rather than we went into sort of like make a whole record, which we did on our second album. It feels very young. A little naive to me, but I think it's a very accurate and a very accurate document of who we were at that time.
What do you remember from it first coming out? Because as a record, it did well. It established you very quickly.
Yeah, we weren't expecting that at all. I mean, my main motivation was to never have to get a job, and I was just, I'd already decided at 11 that was going to be an impossibility.
I'm not. It's not the normal.
The office, the morning commute, all of that is just not going to happen. So I just wanted to be able to house myself and feed myself, really, and I would have been happy with that. But as we worked towards that goal, it gathered momentum, and all of a sudden, something else happened. My primary memories from that time were memories of disbelief.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it was exciting, but, and I've carried that sort of disbelief with me, over the past 20 years. But it was the first times that you'd be in a taxi and you'd hear yourself on the radio. Things like that happened, or even just the fact that somebody, had fallen for it and given you some money to make an album. It's almost as if, I felt like we were going to get caught out sooner or later. So let's work as hard as we can. And, great innocence, real innocence about the future.
I think that's no bad thing, thinking you're going to get found out. I think most people feel that. The people that don't feel like maybe they have that slight insecurity about what they're doing tend to be the sociopathic people that are just like, yeah, I'm amazing, I'm incredible.
Well, yeah, there are sociopaths, in all fields of work, so, why wouldn't there be sociopaths who are musicians?
This is true.
And I think it's got a lot to do with lacking that little voice in the back of your head that tells you could have done better. Oh, man, are you sure? That just, chips away at your confidence. I think if you don't have that voice, you could be in trouble.
When did you first hear the Velvet Underground?
Oh, wow. It must have been when I was around 15 or 16, really. Because I was studying art history, and of course there's the connection to Andy Warhol at the beginning. So I think it's through that I discovered Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground and the whole cavernous story that is. Yeah.
And it's still impossibly romantic and impossibly cool to this day, that whole world, isn't it?
Yeah, but I bet it really stank.
That was the Velvet Underground and Nico with I'll Be Your Mirror. And you're listening to The First Time with me, Matt Everitt, and my guest, Brian Molko. And we'll have more from my chat with Brian, all coming up after the 6 Music News.
6 Music.
This is BBC Radio
6 Music.
Welcome back, I'm Matt Everitt, and you're listening to The First Time with my guest, Placebo frontman Brian Molko. And you just heard the brilliant Pure Morning from Placebo's second album, Without You I'm Nothing, released in 1998. So back to our chat with Brian, talking to me in 2016, an interview that's never been aired before.
With Placebo, when did you first realise that you had the different kind of fans? Because some bands have fans of people that like them and follow them. Other bands have fans that care a lot. Depeche Mode have the same thing. Muse have a similar thing these days. Placebo have always had that thing when it's like there is there's an open heart connection with the people that love your music. It's always been there, hasn't it? Can you remember first having that thing?
It's been there since like the first gigs that we did in pubs in London.
Right from the start.
Right from the start, you know, kind of thing. It was the fanzine era. So you would meet a lot of people who are writing little fanzines. So we met a great deal of our fans at the beginning, and we could really, really sense the identification that was there. And we grew to realize what that identification was the square peg in the round hole, which myself and Stefan had felt throughout our teenage years, and which we kind of brought into the band. Kind of growing up feeling like you never really fit in, it has a major impact on you. We came to realize that in our own small way, we're appealing to people who are similar to us, the misshapes. And we thought that was fantastic. We didn't set out to court the misshapes of the world. But we were pleased that this is what was happening, because these were people who could relate to us and we could relate to them, essentially.
You don't care about us. Oh, you don't care about us.
How do you think, as the momentum of the band built, how did you think you cope with it? Because I remember seeing Pure Morning on Top of the Pops and thinking, this is a band they know exactly what they're doing. Did you cope well, or was it a lot more out of control than it seemed?
Oh, it was a state of pure confidence, a confidence which I don't think I'll ever be able to feel again. It was absurdly large. As soon as we had some success, we exploded, inside, and at that point, the sun shone out of our backsides, and we could do no wrong. We didn't care what anybody else thought. That's helped a lot if you go out every night and if you party every night, kind of thing. You kind of get it helps you get to that space, that warped reality. But I wish I had the confidence now that I had then.
Wow.
I mean, it was so. I just think it's a natural thing that happens to people.
Why don't you have it as much now?
Because I've been beaten up by life. That's why. I'm not complaining. It's been an interesting ride. But I've got scars to show for it. Yeah, I think that's essentially the case, for a lot of people. Anyway, that kind of horrifically arrogant, brazen bravado can only be sustained for a certain amount of time, and it's something particular to a young gentleman. And we kept it going for a while. We kept it going for a few albums. But what goes up must come down.
Bob Dylan.
Oh.
When did Bob Dylan first start meaning something to you?
Around the age of 13 and trying to learn how to play guitar. And I suppose it was the beginning of my hippie phase as well. It would get more psychedelic. But as an artist, as a writer, it's all about the song for me. It's never really been about gaining technical dexterity. Learning how to play guitar was about learning how to use a tool to be able to write a song. And that was with me already as a teen. What finer teacher, for example, could you have than Bob Dylan? I think what was attractive about him was that, his guitar playing wasn't actually that fantastic, and his voice was just like so weird and quite unmusical when you first hear it. So it's very, very striking. I think it's a bit of a Marmite thing, Bob Dylan's voice, really. But I was attracted to it straight away. And Masters of War for me, I think it's a really significant song because it's a very early piece of work for him. It's on his second record, and most of us associate the protests against the Vietnam War that happened in the United States, more towards the end of the decade, 67, 69, But this was recorded and released in 63, which is the beginning, and it's Dylan. For me, at his most vociferously splenetic and almost hateful. In this song, he wishes death upon the warmongers, which is pretty intense. I know the rest of his work quite well. I don't think I've ever heard him so vicious than on Masters of War. But it's an empowering feeling if you connect to it. And, you know, I have. It's, I can feel this way today if I read the newspapers too much, you know, and think about everything that's going on at the moment, really. So for me, it still rings true.
What's the point when you can remember thinking for the first time, if I don't alter my lifestyle, this maybe isn't going to work out too great for me?
I wasn't expecting that. 2006? Yeah. 2006.
What happened?
Just what happened to everybody who finds himself locked up in a cell called addiction, you know? Your entire life is taken over and you cannot function whatsoever without a certain substance. Yeah.
How did you change?
I'm still changing. You know, it's a day-to-day thing. It's something I've learned.
Was it a proposition of not being able to be a musician?
No, not for me. But I have seen it happen to others. Yeah, people can't play anymore. You know? It's sad. The simple act of survival, I'm grateful for, you know? And my partnership with Stefan has, you know, weathered the years. But yeah, gratitude, that's, you know, that's the number one for me. Our audiences are still there. They're getting bigger, you know? It's crazy. People still want to hear what we have to say. You know, that's a privilege, you know? And one not to be taken for granted. And if it's all that you can do, and it's that, consequently, it's super precious, then you've got to hold on to it. I really feel like I'm just getting good, to be honest, you know.
That's a cool thing to say.
You know, as far as songwriting is concerned and singing, I've just got there, you know.
We're going to have to touch on David Bowie. What was your first impressions of meeting him?
Well, I was really nervous, so I had to get drunk, you know.
Nervous,
nervous you know, I'd had quite a few Jack Daniels, and it was in Milan. We just played our show opening for him. I mean, this was before we even had a record deal. And we met in the backstage corridor, basically prearranged to say hello, you know, and that's what a gentleman he was. He would
make time
to accommodate anyone. He was down to earth, charming, very easy to talk to, really. And then, of course, as I got to know him better, spending more time with him, things became easier, you know.
A useful guide.
More than a useful guide, I think. A planet around which, in whose orbit I was for pretty continuously for about 5 years. One just absorbs knowledge through osmosis, really, in that situation.
What's the last track we should play? So we've talked about those. It's got to be something new. We don't warn people about this because it can be something of yours, something of someone else's, something you heard this morning, something you've loved for your whole life. But it's the song we're going to finish the show on.
Oh, right. So, you spring this on.
Mm-hmm. Because it makes for a more immediate thing. Sometimes people pick their own stuff, or people just something that popped into their head.
Well, Sonic Youth are the band that changed my life. You know, just totally and completely. I'd been playing guitar, I'd been listening to psychedelic music, some of it, quite out there. I'd recently discovered the Pixies, heard the Velvet Underground, embraced the psychedelia of the Pink Floyd and all of that. But the eureka moment is the discovery of Sonic Youth, Absolutely.
Can you remember that moment, that record?
Well, it must have been, there used to be this TV show on MTV called 120 Minutes. and they used to play like a mixture of like electronic music and psychedelia and I suppose avant-garde underground music, and I think I first heard it there. And I saw the video for Cool Thing from the Goo album. So that was my introduction, really. And as I went on to discover the whole Goo album, all of a sudden, just like an entire universe opened for me. I didn't know that it was possible to create the sounds that they were creating, and that it was possible for there to be such beauty in dissonance. They took an instrument and they completely rewrote how to play it, essentially, which nobody really does. And thankfully, this beautiful dissonance, which a lot of people call noise, and unlistenable noise, it was extremely appealing to me. I didn't know that you could put a drumstick under your guitar strings and play. I didn't know that you could play below the bridge and get like some weird gamelan-like sound. This is everything that I discovered through Sonic Youth. And
Drunken Butterfly?
Well, I was going through my collection, and I wanted to choose a track that I thought was as representative as possible, of them, because what they do is quite varied. It's atonal, but it's quite varied. And I also wanted to choose a record that wasn't recorded in the 80s so that it sounded really, really hard when played on the radio. And in my quest, I fell upon Drunken Butterfly from the Dirty album, which was produced by the drummer from Garbage, Butch Vig, who also happened to produce a very famous record called Nevermind. I just thought that this one would sound really, really good on Six Music.
Good to speak to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt.
That was Sonic Youth and Drunken Butterfly, the final choice of my guest here on The First Time this week, Brian Molko from Placebo. You can download this episode and a host of others from the series in the BBC Sounds app. Just search The First Time. Next Sunday at 1 p.m, The First Time is back, and I'm thrilled to say that my guest is legendary DJ Carl Cox. Until then, I've been Matt Everitt. Thanks for listening.
Six Music.
Six Music. This
Is BBC Radio.
Six Music.
Right now, it's Moses Boyd.